Hello and welcome. I'm Rosemary Pena, President of the Black German Heritage and Research Association and Adjunct Professor of German Studies at UBC Vancouver. Our conversation today is the fifth in our spring event series themed Art and Resistance, produced in collaboration with Davidson College. Dr. Emily Fraser-Rath, our students and I are excited to welcome our special guest, Zari Harat, into our virtual classroom. We were honored to host Zari in a public event last week, and by virtue of her generosity, Zari's art will be featured during our annual conference. If you weren't in attendance, I invite you to view the recording. Now, before we begin today's conversation, I'll ask Emily to kindly share a little bit about our work together before introducing and turning the conversation over to Zari and our brilliant students. Emily?
Thank you, Rosemary, and welcome, everyone. Welcome to our students and welcome to Zari. My name is Emily Fraser-Rath, and I'm visiting assistant professor of German Studies at Davidson College, which is located just north of Charlotte, North Carolina in the US. Today is November 3rd, 2022, and we, Dr. Pena, me, and most importantly, our students, are nearing the end of our 10th week together in our German 231 class entitled Black German Art and Resistance. This class, as was its predecessor, is conceived of in three parts. It is first a survey course in the field of Black European diaspora studies. Second, it's a community-based learning course as we support the BGHRA through our work, and will feature our final projects in the BGHRA archive. And it is, most importantly, an opportunity for students, and through these recordings, our broader BGHRA and Davidson communities, to speak with people whose lives and work speak to the intersections of artistic expression, resistance and activism, and identity, among many other things, in modern day Europe. For both today's class and last week's public lecture, I would like to thank my colleagues in German Studies here at Davidson. Thank you to Drs. Burkhard-Henke, Maggie McCarthy, and Scott Denham for your continued support and encouragement. And thank you to Amber McIntyre, our administrative assistant, for making these visits this semester possible. In a moment, Dr. Pena and I will fade into the background and play moderators for the remainder of our time together and allow our students to have the floor. They have prepared insightful questions today based on Zari's artwork and her public lecture last week. Without further ado, I'll now introduce our guest and then turn things over. So our guest today, as mentioned, is Zari Harat, a Hamburg-based visual artist who has studied art, spirituality, and teaching. She embodies a cultural merge between having been born in the US to a South Asian family and now having lived in Germany for most of her life. After her arrival in Berlin in 1981, Zari became an active member in the women's movement. She was a student of Audre Lorde's and a single mother who wanted to give her daughter a world of freedom, which she believed was easier to accomplish as an artist in Germany. Zari has lived a life that resonates with Audre Lorde's discussion of her own hyphenated identity. Zari is a traveler, a teacher, a friend, an artist, a healer, and a bridge person who embraces life beyond Europe, Africa, Asia, South America, and the US. She cares about her friends, and many of her pieces tell stories and speak to dialogue, tolerance, the pandemic lockdown, accidents, healing accidents, and brutal encounters, and looking for forgiveness to make this earth hers to share with her fellow sentient beings. Her work is available to purchase, and you can find it on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media outlets, such as her website, which is www.zariharat.com. That's ZARIHARAT. That her daughter Moira maintains and assists her with. At the BGHRA, as Dr. Pena mentioned, we're also excited to announce our collaboration with Zari both this fall so you can look forward to this. As you're watching this, this is on the archive with her other video from last week and in February, as we feature some of Zari's work at the BGHRA conference. So with that, I'll turn things over to Zari and to our students.
Hello, my name is Zari Harat. I'm a visual artist. Happy to see all of you. I taught some classes today, some classes I didn't reach because I wanted to really see what we are going to do together. Usually when I teach in Hamburg or when I teach anywhere, I try to get everybody involved in what I'm doing, and so that you all have the chance to ask questions, which I'm sure I can answer. If not, I will think about them and get back to you, but I'm sure that I can reach you. Last week, there were some portions of my presentation that, because it went so, it was much longer than I thought, so it didn't get to cover certain areas. What I covered last week were faces, velvet, and Zari. So today, what I want to do is to go into some of my other work. And so what I will do is take you to new folder 2, and sensuality and latest. So and then I would love you to ask me questions about my work. I always paint every day, so you know there's new work that you're going to see. So I sent you a lot of my work. You know, I could also update it and send you some more, but I would really, really love you to engage in discussions with me and to share your own creative merging and emerging possibilities. Do you all speak German?
No, there's 2 people in the class who are learning German, but
Oh,
the rest not yet.
Okay. Just asking because I sometimes mix things when I have a mixed class, and so I can speak English. So about the 20th of September, 25th of September, I went to Paris and I had to teach a drawing class using fountain pens in French, and that was 2 classes. So that was quite an experience. It was good. It was okay. But I'm sure I can handle it today. So I see there are a few people online with me. There's Gader, Muhammad, Isaac Bynum, Kenny, Jayla Evans, Will Holden, Wengate, Jayla Davis, and Grace Catlin. Is that right? So when the other people come in, that's fine too, but I will, if without further ado, get started. Is that okay? If you have any questions, put them in the chat and I'll try to get there and I'll try to see them. I'm not so sure what will happen. So I'm going to start out with the new folder, and I'm going to open it up in preview. So, and I think you have most of this work. And so here we go. And I'm going to share it. I can also make it bigger. My work also has titles. Let's see if I make it bigger. Does that work for you better?
It was actually bigger the first way.
Okay, I'll go back. I thought so too, but I wasn't sure. Okay. This piece is called A Splash of a Short Walk in Beirut. And I like to travel and I like to paint in different places. This time around, I'm not going to tell you so much about me. If you have questions, you can ask. But I want to talk about my work. And there's a lot of expression with color and with form and with dealing with the moment. So this had to do with time spent in Beirut, movement. So it's of course not a realistic piece, but it deals with the feeling of being there and what occurs. I think that wherever you are, you should start drawing. So I hope that you all keep sketchbooks and that you're all sketching every morning. I know you might think, oh, I'm so tired. My coffee got cold, but please, please, please sketch every morning. And I also do something with my classes in Hamburg, or where I have people to work with the morning pages from Julia Cameron, which is to write 3 pages every day of your insights when you get up, not later on in the day. And when you draw, soon after that, you come up with some amazing work. So these pieces are some contemporary pieces mostly today. This piece is called Air Bubbling. I was at a carousel in Paris. I also went to see a dentist. So there's all of this coming through in my experience here. This piece is an A3 piece, which means it's 42 by 29.97 centimeters. Do not ask me what they are in inches right now. I'd have to rethink it. So when I'm in the US, I know inches and feet. And when I'm in Germany or other places, I know the metric system. And since the most of the world works metrically, I somehow, I'm not so into the inches yet, but I can find it if you must have it. Okay. And this piece is called Air Bubbling. And I like to work in fountain pen lately. These are works on paper. These pieces, if you get to see them when I show them, if we print it at this side, their size, it's a pretty good size. I mix a lot of my colors. I buy, inks and fountain pen, other fountain pen colors or watercolors or gouache. But I'm one to mix my colors, and I think you could get a feeling of that. And then I put a lot of layering and interlayering, and so there's lots going on. So for me, this is a bit of the Ferris wheel experience, a bit of the, going to the dentist, also, telling each other stories. We all have stories to share. This piece was done in Paris during the time when I was preparing for the class I taught, which was around the 20th. So I was there on the 16th, and this piece is called Arrondissement 2, this second arrondissement. It's a district in Paris. And I just wanted to get the feeling for where I was, what I was going to, be a part of, so that when I taught a class, I could also give people a relevancy to their environment, to where they come from. And so I carry sketchbooks with me. I carry art supplies with me all day. And when I take a break and sit in a cafe, or when I go back to my studio, I'm always drawing. I'm always painting. It's a nonstop relationship with me. And this is how I felt about this district. I don't know New Jersey, but I could tell you that each part of the world has a very special story. So where you live, you could start drawing that place and just experience it from a different place. Am I speaking too quickly, or am I speaking too slowly? It's okay?
You're just fine. Perfect.
All right. This piece is called Arrondissement. It was, I use gouache, I use fountain pens, I use watercolor. I wanted to have the feeling once again of being in another district. It's the first district in Paris. And I was listening to the jazz music on the street. I love music from anywhere in the world. So this music that was in the background, and just seeing how the people were moving and experiencing them, it took me to this piece. It's once again an A3 piece. This piece is called As You Will. And As You Will has to do with what do you want in life. Do you usually use watercolors? I use everything. I can use all forms of medium. So I studied art, so I'm whatever speaks to me, I work with. So yes, I can use watercolor, I can use Winsor Newton, I can use Rauni and Dalla, I can use Van Beek, I can use Van Dyck, I can use Schminke, I can use Russian colors. Lately, we can't get Russian colors, you can imagine why. But I can use other things. I also use gouache, and I sometimes mix eggs into my work. So I like to create the colors that I want to work with.
Zari, you mentioned gouache in your lecture and today. What is that?
It's a bit like tempera, and you add egg to it. You can buy there's a French company called Dasco, and they have a wonderful gouache. They have it's sort of like an egg based. It's a bit thicker than watercolor. It has more density, so you can thin it. You can also add other possibilities, like you could use water, you could use honey. That's why I like the Russian colors, because honey you have to treat it afterwards. You have to put a fixative on it, otherwise you have visitors. So but I do experiment, and sometimes I use alcohol. Somebody just wrote, you said in your talk last week and today, that titles are very important to your work, which is the opposite of the artist, Eta Perip, who we've talked to before. Why are titles important, and what value do they bring to your work? Oh, well, I come up with titles later on. Titles are important to me because they're part of the dialogue with my work. So in the past, I also did some work where I was working as a graphic artist as well. So I would play with typography and these forms, and also Flash, and I would animate them, but I'm not doing that right now. You won't see that today from me, but you can get an idea. If you ever want to see it, get in touch with me. I could put in the chat my email address. So, but you know, each artist approaches their work differently. If one person says, I don't use titles so much, that's their expression. It's like one person has blue eyes, some people have blue and green eyes, some people have brown and green eyes, and other people, you know, brown eyes. So, you know, it's about the same with the titles. Oh, how do you decide on a title of a painting, and what is the biggest influence on your art? Lots of influences. So when I was a young art student, I was very in love with Frida Kahlo. I think you know who Frida Kahlo is. And I got to be a student curator for Frida Kahlo for the School of the Art Institute at MoMA in Chicago. And so that meant that I looked at the pieces of her work that I thought were appropriate or fit to our story. And I noticed her titles, and I noticed how sometimes her titles from first glance didn't fit what I thought. But when I thought about it, I saw that she was interweaving a lot of different stories. And that fascinated me. So it still fascinates me. So the titles can come sooner or later, but they, they're just, they come. This piece is called Balance or Dive. This was done in the first time this year I was in Paris. I had an art grant. And so I was in an area called Sentier. Sentier used to be a red light district. Now it's been gentrified. It's expensive. But I wanted to have the feeling in my work of being in Paris, having a place where I could just sit and paint and paint and draw and draw and draw. And so I was doing larger pieces and smaller pieces. These pieces that you're looking at are basically, once again, A3, 42 centimeters by 29.97 centimeters. Somebody just asked, what does adding faces to your works do to their meaning and reception? What can adding faces make possible? Well, I love faces, and faces crop up all the time. There's a lot that has to do with faces, I love to draw faces, but I also love to draw other parts of the body. You can see fingers here, you can see thighs, you can see breasts, you can see all sorts of parts of the body that I, work with. But I think the faces tell stories. Each and every face tells a story. Whether you work abstractly or if you tend to work a little bit more, whatever realistically is, you can debate that. But every face is really a book. And you could sketch somebody 20 times and have 20 to 50 different drawings. So let me go on to the next one. This piece is called Beautiful Words Activated. I was in a forest in Hamburg, and I sat in the forest. We had a lockdown, and so the trees started to look different for me. The people started to look differently to me. And so I was thinking about, the bulges on the bark actually looking like eyes, or, or sensory places to take me to another, dimension. And if you notice at the bottom here, I have lips instead of roots. Somebody wrote, how has your work evolved over time? Quite a bit. If you were to come to Hamburg to my painting studio, and if I showed you the work that I started doing in 1981, and then earlier when I finished art school, which was, I think, back in 1978, my work has emerged again and again because I did see things from a different perspective. I've worked with serigraph, with silkscreen. I've worked with lithography. I've worked with all the mediums you can imagine, with charcoal, with the Conti crayon, with pastels, with oils, with acrylics. Oil and acrylic, I can tell you why I'm not working with them right now. And that is because when I think about the world we live in, my studio that I have now, I still have to find a new studio, but the studio space is usually small. In the winter time, oil is not, you need a lot of space if you work with oil, and it has to take a lot of time to dry. So oil and I are not exactly in a relationship today, but I do work with printing and with digital printing and with lots of works on paper. And with acrylic, I've also decided to take a hiatus because, it's plastic. Even though it's beautiful to work with, I love working with it. I'm thinking about our Earth, and I would like us to be able to have a dialogue with each other. So that's why these different mediums are part of my life. This is an older piece here. It's called Bewegung. That's why I asked you if you spoke German. It means movement. And it was, I was working with the model and I went from a realistic piece and I just decided to abstract. I love to do that. I love to go back and forth. So this piece was from about 1998. I attended a seminar about deep time, and other people take notes and I draw. And this piece is about 35 by 24 centimeters, and it's a mixture of watercolor, gouache, and fountain pens, and then ink on paper. This piece is called Fountain Feder. As you know, in German, Feder means feather. So it has to do with the feathering effect, the velveting effect. Oh, I went too fast. And it is a larger piece, so you can well imagine that it took some time to go through it. And I like to put layers to let things sit and then to go back into the work and to go and to return. There's a German filmmaker called Doris Dury, and she wrote a film called Greetings from Fukuyama. And I saw this film and I had to teach it because I taught a film class with people in the US. And I wanted to get the feeling of what that film did to me. And so if I teach a film class, I often look at the film a few times so that I can pull some things out. And so sometimes I don't just take notes, I draw or paint. And I hope you see this film. It's really powerful. Due to time constraints, I'm not going to go into that film, but I think if you want to see it, please do. This is another piece. It's called I Am Your Future. I started to see animals when we had the lockdown, and I remembered them. And we had wolves that, you know, showed up in Hamburg. We had cats that showed up. I looked at their paws and their feet, and sometimes their feet made me think of human feet, sometimes a little different. And I kept thinking that they are our future. If we don't take care of them, how can we take care of ourselves? Sometimes I listen to music and things come out. This one is called I Never Meant to Hurt You. It was a song I was listening to by a woman called Laura Nero. Now I'm going to date myself. It's not retro, it's really my time. And I just felt her music, and this is what came through to me. This piece is called I Will Always Love You. I think it has a velvety sensuality to it. Once again, very layered. The green bits here are both watercolor and gouache. So I like how when you do that, you can get this sort of morphing here with color. And you can put layers on and you can take off things and you can add to them. I think watercolor is a very good, sustainable possibility now. This piece is called Inside Glow. I think I will turn this into a lithograph. Lithograph is when you work on a stone and you print up something like this. And so then you make a limited edition of your prints, like 20 to 100. But I think this piece was originally conceived of as being a possibility for that. Do you all draw and paint? No. Okay.
No, and so a few weeks ago, as somebody mentioned in their question, we had the opportunity to paint with a visiting artist here, and it was a real experience. Like she told us basically, here's the canvas, now just do it.
She was
And
right.
and we didn't, for many of us, that was a little bit like, how do you translate, and maybe this is a question for you, how do you translate feeling into material and color and then into image? How does that happen?
Well, I feel it, it's like I was across the street at this Greek restaurant, and I won't show you that drawing because I'd have to work it up. It's in my, I think it's, on paper still, so it hasn't been digitalized. But, I was listening to conversations that people were having. And by listening to those conversations, I think about the color of the words that they are saying and how they're using their language, how they set up their tables, how they spend time with me, with other customers. They seem to like the alcohol paying customers more than me. So I was watching that, and it's okay because I could sit there and draw a lot. But I like to be an avid participant and an observer in the world around me. This piece is called Magdala 2 or 2. This was done in Paris. There's a woman called Elsa Wollaston, who's about 88 years old. She's a dancer. And they made an homage to her. And by homage, this homage, what happened is they made a film called Magdala. And I was there, and it was just fantastic. And so after this, I was sitting with some people outside of the Pompidou Center, and this is what came to me, just having been there. So you ask what happens. I try to let the drawings flow through me, or I get channeled by my artwork. This one is about making life wonderful. It was done last year. I had an exhibit in a place called Fluctoplasma in Hamburg. And we were talking about the whole problem of the lockdown and how it's changed our lives. And I wanted to not just see the negative. And so I decided to take the title, to work with the title, Making Life Wonderful, because most of my contemporaries in Hamburg didn't see anything positive. If you speak German, you know that people sometimes can go into their negative stories. They don't need to, but they do. They do. And so I wanted to flip the coin and flip this with my work. So of course you see darkness, and it defines what's going on, but I wanted to use both because we're neither one or the other. A glass is neither half full or half empty. It could be both. So are we. This piece is called Memory is Golden. This is from October. We were having a discussion in one of the schools that I teach at about memory and how some people said they had long COVID and they had lost their ability to remember things. And I would talk to colleagues and they would say, oh, I don't remember it. And I seem to have a good memory still, knock on wood. And so I said to myself, wow, that's a challenge. And so I had to draw this challenge. So it's once again a lot of different media that I put together. This piece is called Mica, and it's because that mica, when we put on makeup, maybe the guys don't put on makeup, but the female, I'm going to be gender biased at the moment. Mica is the shiny bits, and so when you put those shiny bits on, that glow, that shine comes from mines in India, in Lebanon, in North Africa, in Ethiopia. and mostly children and very poor people work there. And it's a very compromising situation, and some people don't get to live. So I wanted to deal with the beauty of mica as well as the hazardous quality of mica. So it's not that I want to tell somebody you must do this or you must do that. It's just that we can enter a conversation together of contemplation about, are there other possibilities? I do a lot of work with people from the Middle East, and this piece is called Middle Eastern Passage, and it has a lot to do with the difference in the commonality of my friends that live in Lebanon, because we are always discussing what we share and what we don't share. And I think that that's the part of the dialogue and the conversation that we all have to look at. We can't just isolate and say they have nothing to do with us, because we all share a lot with each other. This piece is called the Mitgeschuldigen, which means it comes from during the Second World War in Germany. There were people called Aufsteherinnen or Aufsteher. They were the wardens who worked in the concentration camps who abused people. And sometimes the women who married the Nazi officers didn't want to deal with the fact that they were Mitläuferinnen. They were a part of it, you know, they just went along with the ride, and sometimes were equally as abusive because they didn't take responsibility for their actions. So this piece deals with that. There are films that always come out in Germany about the Second World War, and I was thinking about a woman called Ilse Roth, who was quite a sadist. And I wanted to deal with how I approached what she did. And I feel that she's as much a part of the situation as her husband. It's just that we think about the men as being the negative ones, the abusers, but she was working with them, and she was just equally as brutal. So sometimes we as women and as feminists have to take responsibility for the fact that not every woman is a good person. And men can be feminists too. This piece is called Observation. And this piece is called Paris Vie Antique. And it's about the ancient feelings of Paris. If you're in Paris, you notice it's a city that's built on many layers of the current and the past. And sometimes you can sit in a place and you can see that you're going back 1,000 years, and sometimes you can sit in a place and you can see that it's completely in 2022. And so the dichotomy of that brought on this type of piece. I really wish I could get you to all draw with me. This piece, Prison Has No Convenience, has to do with people not telling the truth to themselves about who they are. You know, it's, I think artwork, if you think about the most recent situation with Twitter, artwork is always speaking to what's going on in the world. And so when I think about prison, you know, it's not outside. We can have prisons inside of our minds, and there's nothing comfortable about being in prison. This piece is called Puppet on the String. It has to do with political figures that end up being manipulated to make choices that seem good for them, but are not good for the other people. And so this was my early reflection on the upcoming elections on the 8th of November. So in 5 days, there are elections, and I was thinking about this a little bit earlier. Respecting language is learning languages so that you're able to communicate with more people.
We've talked a little bit in our class about author, or in this case, artist intentionality, and how that can be read, or to what extent we should take that into account when we ourselves are interpreting a piece of artwork, for example. I wondered if you could share your perspective on that.
Well, when I have an exhibit, I usually don't like to talk to people about what I did. I just want them to look. But I was told by a friend of mine that I should talk a little bit more. And I do have something to say. And I think that artwork is not just lots of nice colors and shapes and forms. It tells a story. And by telling a story, it connects us to our ancestors, it connects us to our future and to our present. And so when we tell a story, when we explore things that we're not used to looking at, if you take out a sketchbook and you go around the city and you start sketching every day, you will see your city with different eyes. Whether you've taken formal drawing classes or not, you will start seeing your city differently. I have some students who did not study art, and I am amazed by the work they do, by their insights, because they start going inside and the answers come. And so the forms come to them. So they didn't have formally, working 12 to 16 hours working with the model every day. But what we all have inside is far more dynamic. So it works both ways. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. This piece is called Sterile, and it's because of somebody who was telling me about her former life as a nun. And I was just thinking about the word sterility. Piece is called Thumbs Needed. And this one's called Thumbs Up. One of my students had a terrible thumb accident, and a private student. And I was talking to her a lot about what you can do without your thumb, because she said, I cannot draw with my, without my thumbs. And so maybe I should drop the class. And so I thought about, so I started doing some drawings, and this piece was done without my thumbs, these two pieces actually. And I realized that in the previous piece with Thumbs Needed, of course, it had a different sleekness and form. When I had to go here and not use my thumb and to use my other hands, other fingers, sorry, not my other hands, my other fingers, I started to come up with different forms, because even though I'm ambidextrous, I can work with both hands. I realized that different fingers are differently abled because I use them differently. But because I wanted to explore somebody saying I can't use my, fingers, my thumb. So what do you do? And I realized I could draw and come up with something very powerful, but different. This piece is called Unblocking. We talk a lot about blockage when I teach design classes, and I always want people to think about the space they use, and I want them to unblock, to just first create using InDesign and Illustrator and Photoshop. And they always tell me, but you have to teach me how to use the programs, and then they put themselves in little spaces instead of explore and experiment. So you probably got from me that I explore and I experiment a lot. That's part of my personality. So that's that group of pieces. Was this, does anybody have questions before we continue?
Gadir asked in the chat. Gadir, do you want to just
You
read
talked,
your?
Kadia wrote, you talked a lot about influences and how they can completely change your art, but also that you can give titles to your works and are very intentional with them. Could you elaborate more on that dichotomy? How much control does an artist have over their works? That's a good question. Sometimes the art has more control over us than we have over it. I think that art, you find something in your work that that it controls you. You know, you go down a certain road and you're working a certain way, and so you have different things that come up. Would you consider your work abstract? There's a really nice word in German called Jein, yes and no. I think that that my work has a lot of expression to it. I think it can sometimes be abstract, but I think abstract is a big story. I'd like to know more about what you're asking. Oh, there's now one new message. Wow, you're good. What are the motivational differences between sketching daily and the work you create as a names piece? Well, I think if I draw every day, it keeps my hand working. It's active. I'm seeing and thinking with my eyes and my hands, you know. But when I work on some pieces longer, it gives me the chance to have kept my hand going so that I'm working with my hand and my eye differently. I don't just go in and say, oh, it's a lovely day, let's just sketch. It's a buildup. It's like when, I guess, you do yoga every day. If you breathe every day, deeply, you feel your breath differently than if you just breathe, once a week and try to do it. It's something else. Did I answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. This piece has to do with arid walks, and this piece has to do with Lebanon, with Beirut, which is not a desert, but it's very arid. So I wanted to get the mood and the gesture and the feeling of being in that place. So where you live, you might not just want to draw the urban sketching route, you might want to draw the mood of the people there, the fingers, the hands. You might just look at the eyes or the skin, and you could play with it and twist it around and twirl it, and different things could come to you. This piece is about, 1 second, 75, so 1 meter by 75 centimeters, so it's a bit bigger. It's watercolor and gouache. It's a bit older. There were 2 women who were talking about Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker was born in St. Louis. Her father was German. Her mother was a washerwoman of Native American and African American background. And the whole fetish idea of Josephine came through in this piece because I was speaking to a woman, Beate, in Germany, who had a grandfather from Zaire, but she looked like Buster Keaton. And she asked me, what is a person of color? Do you know what those people are? Why do people ask me about these people? And she says, I'm a European. And so this is what happened. I listened to what she said and I did this drawing. And I said to Beate, well, I think this is how I look at this, It's a play of going back and forth. So I've never been to Zaire. Your grandfather lived in the so-called in Belgium, and that was a difficult story. But this is what I feel from the stories you've told me. So I think I'm a bit of a storyteller. This piece is called Decolonizing Views, and it's because many times there is a colonial way of looking at people who do not fit into the European trajectory, or the whatever Europe is. Europe is varied. Perhaps if you go to Prague, you'll see people on the street and they have brown skin and you think, oh, they must be foreigners. No, they are definitely Czech. And they've, they didn't need, their story came from a different place than you could imagine. So I was thinking about taking those views we have about other places and just debunking them. They have nothing to do with the people. You cannot take the North American idea of race, which is a construct, and put it on other people. If I speak to my friend Venucha, who's from Prague, who worked as a model in the US, and people read her as being an Eastern European model. And her mother looked, she passed away, like Audre Lorde. That shows you about what colonialism does to our heads. It divides us instead of brings us together. This piece is called The Fifth Dimension, and it has to do with the discussion about gender and transgenderism and people seeing themselves as being on the edge. These are big discussions. I lived in Berlin for a long time. There's a big discussion also in Hamburg. And some people, if you think about India, some people are actually born with both sexes and they are not, cut up. So this fifth dimension is to just take you over the edge of your comfort zone of what is a man, what is a woman. Some people are everybody. You have every possibility. Just like some people are hyphenated, they've got, more things going on. In a drawing class I taught online on Sunday, there was a Chinese, Indian, African woman born in Switzerland and her sister born in India. So, we always have to decolonize our views because they get us in trouble. We don't see the people. We only see our, limitation. This piece is called Gift of the Marys because I sometimes have some very Catholic-oriented people or very religious-oriented people in classes, and they love to talk about their Old Testaments or New Testaments, their Maronite cultures, their Roman Catholic cultures, and this amuses me. So everything amuses me, really. So this is what came out. And this was my idea about goddesses, about cultures embracing each other.
This might be a silly question, but this looks like each one of these lines is that like its own like pointillism? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's called pointillism, and I used fountain pens actually to create different fountain pens to create the points. And of course it takes longer. So somebody asked me about sketching daily. I mean, this piece takes a little bit longer because pointillism, you have to spend a little bit more time there.
Yeah,
And
I
this
was gonna
piece,
say it would take a while.
Yeah, it did. And this piece is actually about 65 by 50 centimeters, so it's not small. So if you want to work with pointillism, you can spend some time there. This is having questioned you about the help. Somebody was telling me about the servants in their family. This was a relative who was telling me about the servants in her family in Bombay, and I was thinking about my idea, and she said, well, who are your servants? I said, servant one, servant two. My hands are my servants. But the help is a bit, and then I thought about the book that was written where, you know, I think Viola Davis played in it. And so I thought about taking that whole idea of the help to a more universal space. Let's see, no more new questions. Okay, then I can go on. This is called healing service. And I think we all have to do a bit of healing internationally. And so this piece is from 2020. It was just before I got Corona. So I was on a challenge because there were no shots or anything like that. So I didn't draw, unfortunately, during that time. Sorry. I drew afterwards when I could get up and, but I think it was a pretty awesome disease issue. If you have any questions, we could answer them, or I could go on. I could go forever. So.
Well, I have a question. Will they think more about their own questions? So our class is called, you know, Black German Art and Resistance. We've broadened the definition of Black German globally and then sort of destroyed the category. And now we talk about Black diaspora in Europe. And I was wondering if you could speak more. I know you answered Elizabeth's question about this word resistance, but could you speak about the relationship between artistic expression and resistance, or art as resistance, or resistance as an art?
Oh, art is, oh, yes, definitely. I talked about it last week, but I'll talk about it again. The fact that you draw and paint every day is resistance. It is art resistance. It's saying to society, I do use my Instagram account, but I don't just need that, because I'm looking inside of myself to find possibilities that I never thought about. And that is resistance, because we are challenging a world that wants to give us pat answers and standard phrases. So I feel that it's very important to question everything. You know, if I sketch with my left hand, it's the sketches are different, I've noticed, than when I sketch with my right hand. So by right, I am ambidextrous, but each hand has her own personality. And when I put them together in a sketch, there's a different conversation going on. So you don't see that because you're not watching me sketch. If you were sitting with me, you would see that. But it would take you a while. You'd have to be with me for a while. I feel that the work that we do is always challenging the world around us and how we deal with that world. This piece, for example, might answer the question. It's called Ajde Verrat. Verrat in German means betrayal. And it has to do with people who are like wolves in sheep's clothing. You think they're your best friends. You think that they understand you. And you end up finding out that they're not the friend you thought that they were. And so in finding yourself, you might find the gems of falling in love with yourself. But it's a difficult story because you have to forgive yourself You have to see that person, forgive their story, but probably keep them at a little distance. And drawing helps to do that. It helps to say, I had that moment there and let me let it go. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
I see there are new questions coming up. In the discussion last week, you talked a lot about velvet in your work. What does velvet mean to you? Velvet is for me flow and fluidity. So if your work has, or when my work has a velvet feeling, it's letting itself go into the flow. And flow and glow come together for me. So this piece also took a bit of time to work on, and it was a very emotional piece because I found that some people were not as honest that I thought were old friends. And so my artwork is where I go to handle my stories. This piece is called All Energy. There's a discussion. So somebody asked me about my faces. So you can see that these faces are very different. The face on the left, on my left, is done partially with my left hand and partially with my right hand. And if you understood what I said, I do draw differently with different hands. So each hand is very important, very powerful. The next piece is called aubergines. You call them eggplant. And I said aubergines are my identity because I love aubergines. I love the feel, I love the taste, I love the color, I love to sketch them. I'm in love with aubergines. This piece is called Blowing Off Lies. And so there's, if you think about the dark space used here, it's very telling, as well as the colors.
Zari, are you ever surprised by how someone interprets your work?
Am I ever surprised about what?
How someone might interpret your work, or
Oh, I heard today somebody did interpret my work so differently than I do. And I spoke to the person and I said, this is fantastic. I didn't see those insights. And this person saw all sorts of things I didn't quite see. And I'm open to still reconsidering why the person saw it that way. I'm not saying that my insights are the only ones, but you can all tell me very different stories. There's one guitar player, a bass player who lives in Berlin, and he always sees music in my work. He always sees people playing music. So it's a little different than the way I see it. It's musical, but he sees the music. This piece is called California or Europe. You know, some people try to do both, and California is one direction, Europe is another direction, but sometimes we're a mixture of both, and so our identity is a mixture of both. So you can take it as you like. And these are colors that I think, for me, have to do with Northern California and Europe. So you all live in New Jersey, right?
no, actually, Davidson is in North Carolina.
Oh,
So
sorry. Oh,
yeah,
that was bad.
Rosemary is in New Jersey, but the rest of us right now are in North Carolina. Yeah.
So North Carolina also probably has a variety of colors and possibilities and people, and you could just take your sketchbooks and just walk around and go to your coffee shops and look at the weather from one day to the next, or the people or the music of North Carolina, or the Geechee stories. I don't know North Carolina. I'm just telling you what I could imagine. This piece is called Carrying August, and it's like caring about how our seasons change and how we get involved with the seasons, with the global change. So I found that when I was in France that these colors were pretty good colors, but you know, and I saw them later on, but when I got back to Germany, the colors we had already started to lose leaves, and there were lots of leaves on the street, and you know, the season had completely shifted. Like I think today we have between 8 to 13 degrees centigrade. So do not ask me to change that for you, but I think it's on the cool side. I'll just put it that way. You can look it up on your own, or you can ask me and I'll look it up, but I think it's on the cool side.
Okay, well, it looks like our time has run out again, Zari. So
Oh, okay.
but we thank you for sharing with us again. And of course, we look forward to future collaborations with great anticipation. As always, we're grateful to Emily and Davidson College for making these so critical conversations possible, and to our students whose contributions make them especially rewarding. Today's recording will soon be available on our YouTube channel at Black Germans. Please subscribe and turn on the notifications so that you will be alerted as new ones are added. Visit our website at bghra.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Eventbrite for details about future events and the annual conference coming up in February. We hope that you've enjoyed today's discussion as much as we have, and until next time again, thank you for your time and attention.